My two big passions in life are building amps and building hot rods. So I'm sitting here now in my shop here in Tacoma, Washington, and I want to tell you about two new products we have that come from my desire to build gear for professional musicians. The X88 IR, which is a reissue of the original X88R, and then the SLO-100R, which was always the rack-mounted SLO with some new improvements. So none of this would even exist had it not been for my having met Bob Bradshaw and being introduced into the world of rack. So I haven't seen Bob in many, many, many years. And so we reached out to him, and he was gracious enough to fly out here and join me today to talk about the X88 IR and the SLO-100R.
Look at the rods, man. This is cool. God damn. That's badass.
Oh my God, it's Bob.
That's so cool. This is where it happens.
Oh my God, it's Bob Bradshaw.
Oh my God. Mike.
I haven't seen you in so long.
I know, it's been forever, right?
Has
We're all
been
gray
forever.
now and shit.
Welcome to Tacoma, and welcome to
the land of the pointy trees.
We do have pointy trees here.
Yes.
Yeah, good to see you.
Likewise,
you
my
look
friend.
fabulous.
Yeah, you too, buddy.
Well,
We're
thanks.
still kicking. We're on the right side of the grass.
We are.
You
We
know?
certainly
It's
are.
always a good day when you're that.
So good to see you. Thanks for
Yes.
coming out.
Sure, for sure.
This is so awesome.
amazing. It's been so
we got a
long.
lot of catching up to do.
Indeed. Yeah.
Have a seat.
Oh, man. Nice. Stool up.
Stool up.
When did you come back up here?
I came back to Seattle because I was originally from Seattle. So I came back to Seattle in 94. And so I was in Seattle from 94 until 2018, which is when I kind of shut down my shop, kind of went into what I call semi-retirement. So yeah, this is kind of where I ended up. And then I was really fortunate to be able to find this shop space. And I was like, okay, I can have a place for my hobbies and a little place to work on amps up in the front if I ever
Seems
want to.
ideal, man.
It's pretty
just
ideal, I
great.
gotta tell you. I
Yeah,
love it. So
yeah.
this is kind of where I hang out, and then, you know, and I can just kind of tinker around and, you know, come up with ideas and designs for stuff.
for
and
sure.
We can still whip out Soldano products, but I don't have to run a business anymore. And that's the
Right.
part that I love the
Yeah, I'll
most.
bet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
getting
cool.
away from that.
Yeah. But still keep your hand in.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
You can still keep this never shuts off.
No, it doesn't.
Right?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and that's the thing that was, you know, was when I was deciding I wanted to wind down the business part of it, I was like, you know, I don't want to just like sell the brand to somebody that's going to, you know, make it all corporate and I'm
Right.
not going to have any feedback.
Right.
And I didn't want to just shut it down because I kind of felt like, well, you know, there's still some life
it's
left in the
your-
product.
Yeah, it's your
So I
your
had,
love.
yeah. And so I was lucky enough that I had, you know, I knew boutique amps because I had done a module for the Synergy
Right.
thing and everything. And so, so Avi and I started talking, and it seemed like the perfect way to go because
Yeah.
now I can just design stuff and come up with crazy ideas, and
Sure.
he can make all of it and deal with the marketing, and the business
Yeah.
side of it and the payroll
Yeah.
and all that, and I can just like kind of
Yeah, I
go
hear
like,
that.
yeah, this is cool. So yeah, so that's kind of what I'm doing these days.
Yeah, that's good.
Now having time to do what I want to do and having a place that can do it, that being boutique,
Yeah.
I was like, you know, it'd be cool to bring some of this stuff back because these guys were sort of the benchmark of, you know, what kind of got me on the map. And
Yeah.
and so it took a bit of time to get around to doing it, but redesigned
There you are, man.
the rack mount SLO-100
Yeah.
and now the X88 IR
Yeah.
with all of its extra super cool
Yeah,
features.
you slap some lipstick and a mini skirt on that
Yeah,
thing, man,
yeah.
and tricked out. And I think it's really smart because it's
Thank you, yeah.
it's a modernization, an update of a classic,
Yes.
and it really is, and it gives you these extra interfacing bells and whistles that you would have added on anyway.
Right.
You know, in a modern situation,
Yes.
which people are using it in, you know,
Right.
the IRs and, you know, this and,
Yes.
and stuff. And then why not throw in some extra tonal things?
Yeah,
Which was
exactly,
cool.
exactly.
Bump the level up on the clean channel.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
To match the other two. And
Yes.
this was an interesting going between the crunch and overdrive.
Yeah, because you know, because that way, because then if you want 2 overdrive channels, you can have 2 overdrives.
Yeah.
If you want 2 crunches,
Because
you can
there's
have 2
always that guy out there that wants that.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
So,
I know.
You got to try to cover your ass.
You do. You
with
got to
this
have,
stuff, man.
You got to have every.
I know.
You got to offer them so much. You know.
I know. So another thing that I really like about this thing is that you've got MIDI control of stuff, and I like that you've got also control over a lot of the various switching aspects of it via MIDI CC, as well as program changes and everything. And also, you've got a real cool little phantom power jack here where you can plug a power supply in to power your MIDI controller that you connect through the MIDI in.
Right.
Very handy.
Yes.
And much appreciated.
Good.
Especially by guys like me.
Yes, because you've got to make all this stuff work with everything.
I know. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a handy feature that not everybody does to make things a little more easy to interface.
Well, good. I wanted
really
to try
cool.
to cover all the bases.
Yeah.
And I made it dual voltage too because so many guys travel.
Absolutely.
And the
very
original
handy.
X88s, just because of the way we were winding the transformers, I wasn't able to do a dual voltage transformer in those originals because I was getting noise problems and it's probably DeYoung's fault, really. I mean, they probably could have come up with a dual voltage transformer that would have worked, but
Just 2 primaries?
yeah, we had 2 primaries, but when we wired them in parallel, dead quiet. We'd put them in series to run them in 240 volt world. They'd start making noise. And it was it was like this parasitic noise. It wasn't like anything you could really you could see it on the scope. It'd be this little prick at the top of the waveform. We couldn't get rid of it. So finally, we just wound up, so it was a flat pack transformer. It wasn't a toroidal. The new this
got a
has toroidal in it.
That's handy too because
Yeah.
you less stray hum field.
Yes.
Plays nice in the playground
It
with
does.
the others.
It does. So I think if I'd known about
rack,
toroidals
that
when I
is.
did this amp, I would have put a toroid in it, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So this has what they call a flat pack, and it's
Right.
got this weird core with these
Yeah,
2.
I've seen 'em.
And for some reason, it just always had this, when we tried to do the dual voltage transformer, it always made noise.
Yeah.
So we did a dedicated 240 volt transformer, which by the way, I still have boxes of because I didn't sell that many of them. No, actually I've got like 12 of those left that I ran into the other day. And then we did a 117 volt. This one, because it's got the toroidal power transformer, we just put a nice little switch here. You change the fuse right there. Bingo! You're off in Europe doing your European tour.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah, and then there's a ground lift also on
That's
the
handy.
XLRs, so that when
Handy
you're
on
working in the
XLRs.
studio or if you're going into the front of house board,
You never
through
know
here,
what you're going to interface to.
you can find the place where you get it quietest.
This rear panel just looks great with all this extra connectivity and everything. It's really cool. And you've kept it hand built in the USA.
That's right.
Tell me about that.
Well, as all Soldano products have been, I've always felt really strong about U.S. manufacturing and about hand building things.
Sure.
And as you remember, my little tiny shop in Melrose.
Absolutely.
And then when I moved to Seattle, I had a shop in Seattle.
Yeah, man.
All hand built stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's important to me, especially on gear like this, pro type stuff, that we have that quality control.
Yep.
So these are all made in Commerce, California.
Yeah,
and,
cool.
And all the powder coating, the anodizing, silk screening, it's all done right in the USA. And so it's kind of sort
important.
of, I think it's important.
Yeah,
and it's
big
always
time.
been sort of a part of my legacy has been, American made products.
Yeah. Yep.
And the attention to detail that you get from having the same crew building the same things for a long
Absolutely.
time. And so with with the manufacturing capability of boutique amps, we can build everything right in that factory
cool.
in Commerce.
Yeah. So all these guys, everything's done there.
Oh, everything's done there.
Yeah, cool.
All hand built.
Sweet.
And I appreciate you even handing it over to me in the first place.
It was
that was such an awesome time for me.
Sensing a need, and well, the story behind that was, I was touring with Steve Lukather.
Yeah, that's right.
And at the time, his rig was going through various iterations, as it always does.
Always does. So, that's right.
So this particular one, we had an amp rack full of 3 heads. We were going for 3 basic food group type sounds.
Right.
We had a Mesa for a clean, which we use for our clean channel, which sort of simulated like a Fender type
twin
thing.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
And we had a Marshall that was tweaked out that had a crunch sound, and we had your SLO-100 in there.
That's right.
Like number 5, I think.
It was,
Didn't he?
I think it was 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, very low serial number.
How did you come about? How did he get in touch with you? Do you remember?
That's what's so funny. Okay, so I arrive in Hollywood in January of '87.
And you had your shop on Melrose.
My little shop on Melrose.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, for the life of me, get anybody interested in what I was doing, right? Because I just this newbie in town. Nobody knows heard of me.
Yeah.
But I had this kid that came around to my shop, and he was from Canada. His name was Tony Antidormi, and he was just this gung-ho guy, lots of energy, just super ambitious. And he's like, I want to sell these amps for you. And I'm like, really? Great. I go, I can't pay you. I'm not making any money yet.
Yeah.
And I said, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you 10% off the top of any amp you sell, because I can just take it right when the guy writes the check. I can hand you a check for
boom, and done deal.
Done deal, yeah. It's like, and so that guy, I got to tell you, he pounded the pavement for months and months. And he would cold call. I mean, I sent him out with an amp, and he, like I say, he just pounded pavement. And somehow, and I still to this day don't know exactly how he did it, but he got into one of Steve's sessions he was doing.
Probably around Hollywood or something.
Yeah.
He happened to know that he was in there doing stuff.
Because
I never saw him. I was already doing stuff for him because that started for me summer of '84 is when I first started.
You were there way before me.
Yeah. And I wouldn't necessarily know what he was doing in between tours. I mean, the gear would come to my shop if it needed work or something.
Okay,
and
right.
Andy Brower's place
of course,
was, the Cartage company.
Cartage, that's
and
right.
And he had his service that he provided.
Yes.
For, he had a kind of a unique service for the studio guys around town.
He did.
So I'm off in my shop as you were in yours.
Yep.
And it would go around. And then I realized suddenly he's got this cool new amp. Oh, okay.
Cool.
And it wasn't it white?
Snakeskin.
Snakeskin.
Yeah.
Of course, the chassis was white.
White chassis. Yep, exactly.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah,
totally.
so Tony got this thing, he got Steve to listen to it. And
he hears something.
He's
like,
well,
I'll send you a check.
That's what's so funny about it. I said, okay, Tony, come back. Tell him I can
call
build him
Haber.
one. I'll build him one, and I'll have it for him in like a week. And he goes, no, he wants this one.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I'm like,
he's very impatient.
You mean like today, right now? And he goes, yes.
Yeah.
And so sure enough, Tony comes back to the shop, and he's got a check for me. I mean, that's how quick it all happened. And then
nice.
And then the amp, like say, probably he had Andy come and pick it up. Cartage, he's done with the session, take it up. And that's probably when you saw it for the first time, is when it went back to Andy's place. And then from there, man.
So anyway, it got installed into this massive
huge, right?
rack.
Yeah.
I was looking for pictures of it. I know I have one picture somewhere. I couldn't find it.
Then you had all the load boxes, right? The
had
speakers,
load boxes
with the
speakers.
The EV12s in there with
yes, because we realized that a static resistive load wasn't enough for most output transformers to breathe.
That's right. I remember we talked about that in your shop because you showed me those big Dale resistors that you used to use, but they just weren't cutting it like the speaker does.
Some amps were okay that way. Like the Boogie seemed to be okay with that because the majority of that gain and crunch came in the preamp
That's
section,
true.
and
That's
the
true.
output section wasn't breathing.
Wasn't
as
so
much.
necessary. Yeah.
And it was so massively powerful, some of those amps,
Yes.
that you couldn't turn them up anyway.
Right.
So they're not going to push a speaker enough to get some back EMF.
Right.
You know, and,
Right.
and whatever. Anyway, so we had this, we're carting around this massive rack. Yeah. I mean, we already had a massive rack.
Right, just with the gear in it. Yeah, with all the
outboard gear and everything.
all the effects and stuff. And now you got this
And
other
an amp rack, and
Yeah.
then this other associated accoutrements that go
Yes.
along with it, the load
Yeah.
boxes and stuff. And that's when I said, we got to change this thing somehow, man. And I didn't tell him. He didn't know anything about it. That's when,
yeah,
he had no idea that this was coming together.
Oh, I wasn't aware of
Yeah,
that.
no,
That's
I did. This is
cool.
all on me. And
Oh,
so I
man.
got in touch with you.
Yes, that's right.
And we planned this thing out.
Yeah, we were sitting in
And-
your shop.
Yeah. And I gave you one of my switcher chassis
You
to
did.
build it in.
Yep, that black pre-made chassis.
I have 2 pictures
Oh,
of the guts.
yeah, because remember I
One
built
from
that
the front,
goofy,
one from the back.
that goofy like little bridge I made that I put all the tube sockets on. I mean,
Yep.
way overthought.
And
you know?
it had 3 outputs.
Oh, that's right. The original one
It had 3
outputs.
independent outputs on
That's
it. And then we
right.
had a one master output.
That's right.
yeah.
I forgot about it because that's what you wanted.
It's
Yeah,
got your card inside.
Yes.
We managed to silkscreen Soldano on the front of it. That's
Yes.
the only original marking. I surprised him with it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I went, okay, want you to try something now. Don't know if you're going to like it, but here it is. I had this thing built, and sure enough,
Oh, that's so awesome.
he loved it.
That's so awesome.
And that's where it took off, man.
Man, there was a whole slew of guys after him.
Oh my gosh, right? And
Yeah.
it was word of mouth. Yeah, let me show you something.
Okay, cool.
This is pretty funny. I'll go through a little memory lane, everybody. This is something to see. This is Steve Lukather and Mike Landau on the stage at the Baked Potato.
Baked Potato.
Both of them. There's the X88 prototype.
There it is, the black.
Yep.
That's Steve's.
And in Mike's rack,
Mike's
a production
got one,
one.
too. Yeah, there it is.
There it
There's
is,
bigger
man.
than life, and there's and that's Michael's brand new
Living
one.
proof.
Yep. God, 2 of the all-time greatest guitar
I know,
players
man.
in one stage at
Yeah.
one time.
Yep.
I loved going to the Baked Potato. There were some great shows there.
Yeah.
God, I think
there's that.
I think one night I saw Steve up there playing with Eddie. I think Eddie dropped in and played.
Well, and Mike. All 3 of them were on stage one time.
Oh, that's
On that stage.
That's
They
awesome.
shoehorned
God.
Ed's rig in there too.
I'd say, where do you put all this stuff?
Yeah, it's insane. So here's some guy's rig. I don't know who. I can't remember who that is.
Wow.
Can't tell.
Yep. Look at that.
Jay Maskus, Dinosaur
Jay
Jr.
Maskus, that's right.
With a Series 2.
Oh, yeah, that's a 2-channel
Yeah,
preamp.
yeah.
Right there.
Yep.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This might be the same. Is this the same as that one?
No,
it's
this one's
different.
There's a different one.
I think that might be C.C. DeVille,
Ah, yes.
the Poison
yep.
guy.
Yep. CC. I remember selling him that.
And this was in 88.
88.
So,
there you
so
go.
the preamp was just
coming out.
coming out,
Yeah.
and it was word of mouth pretty much,
It
right?
was, yeah,
There
because
wasn't
I
any
never had any
advertising.
money for advertising back in
I
those
didn't
days.
either.
Yeah, you didn't either, right?
Hell
It was-
no, it was
yeah.
all word of mouth.
By then,
And-
you already had a great reputation. I mean, I had heard about you, so I knew what
Yeah.
you were doing.
But that's all it always was. I mean, Landau begot Lukather, begat Van Halen,
Oh, so
begot
Landau was
Steve Vai.
before?
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
I met Mike Landau in 1982 through Buzzy Featon.
Buzzy
Remember
Featon, of
Yeah,
course.
Buzzy was my
yeah.
first major guy,
Oh, cool.
and then it took off from there, and it was always word of mouth. I was in the right place at the right time, as we were back
I
then
was
when
too.
things were going.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, had I not left Seattle and moved to LA that year, I never would have gotten my business off the ground. Because
What
it just
made you
wasn't-
come down to L.A.?
Well, that's why I was sitting up here. I had the SLO done. I was putting these goofy little ads in the back of a Guitar World magazine.
Okay.
They were like, they looked like a classified. They were like this big.
Yeah.
Never sold an amp that way, but you know,
great.
but the thing is, I realized I couldn't reach the musicians, and so even prior to moving to LA, I thought, okay, what I could do is I could set up appointments and I could go to LA and show my stuff, and then maybe I'd get a sale, and then I'd come back. And so, you know, and being as naive as I was back then, I thought that, you know, musicians would be like totally, you know, like we set up a time to meet, it'll happen. So I would,
Flaky fuckers.
so I would set up all these, you know, like meetings.
Guys wouldn't show up.
But I'd get to LA and nobody would show up. It'd be like, I had an appointment. Oh no, they're out at Lake Havasu today. You sure this was the day you were supposed to meet them?
Right.
I go, yes, this is when I was supposed to meet them.
I drove down here.
So that wasn't working out. But I realized that at that point in time, because, you know, this is way before computers or anything, right?
Yeah.
So you had to be where the action was,
man.
you know?
Yeah.
And so I realized there's two places I could be. I could either be in New York or I could be in LA. I didn't want to go to New York. It was too far away.
Yeah.
So I figured LA looked like more fun anyway. So I was like, I'm going to move to LA. So
keep it West Coast.
Keep it West Coast. So in January of '87, I just told my boss, who, like say, was always so supportive of me. I said, you know, I think I need to try this out. And he goes, do what you need to do, man. And so I packed everything. Actually, that '38 Chevrolet, everything went in the trunk of that. I still have it. And I drove to LA in January of '87, just in time to be there for the NAMM show.
Right.
So it took me about 3 months, and I found that place I had on Melrose, which I lived in the back of.
Yeah.
And so I set up shop, and still, though, it took a long time for things to get going. But I knew the minute I got to LA that I was in the right place.
If you could get it in front of guys' ears, you would.
Exactly. That's what I felt like.
Yeah,
and then when Tony came along and he started, you know, hitting the pavement, you know, taking it around to studios, that was an added bonus. But even just being here, like my first amp sale when I got to LA was shortly after I got there. And some guys I had met were locals, you know, they're, okay, now that you're here, you've got to learn the places, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. So you got to go to the Rainbow. We got to go have dinner at the Rainbow. That's something you got to know about the Rainbow. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm game. Let's go.
It is the 80s.
It is the 80s after all, right? So we went to have pizza at the Rainbow, and luckily we sit down at this table, and right across from us in this big, you know, kind of booth, in walks Howard Leese from Heart, you know, red leather jacket, flowing blonde hair, the whole thing, plops himself down in this booth. And so my buddies are all like, that's Howard Leese, you ought to go talk to him.
Who was basically like a Seattle guy, wasn't
right?
he?
He was. So I had to come to LA to meet a guy from Seattle, right? And so they're like, go talk to him. And I go, I can't. He doesn't want to be bothered. But, you know, he's a famous guy. He doesn't want to be bothered by it. No, go talk to him. His friends aren't here yet. He's sitting there by himself. Go talk to him. They literally shoved me out of the booth. So I walk over to this table. I'm like, hello, Mr. Leese. My name's Mike Soldano. I'm from Seattle. And I know you're from Seattle too, but I wanted to tell you about this amp. And he's like, oh, really? You build amps? I go, yeah, I've got this thing. You know, it's a high gain 100-watt amp, and I think you might like it. And he goes, well, he says, tell you what, he says, we're recording out at Rumbo Recorders right now. He says, why don't you come out tomorrow morning and bring it and let me take a listen to it? And so that was my first sale. It's like, okay. So, you know, I pull out my Thomas guide.
He's got number one?
He's got number two. So number one, I sold to a buddy of mine here in Seattle who he always kind of like was kind of interested in what I was doing. So when I started designing and building the SLO, or what became the SLO, Tommy loved the amp. He was just like, oh my God. He says, Mike, he says, I know you're building this for yourself, but he says, if you ever decide to build another one, I want one. And I said, well, you know, because I'm getting so much interest, I think I might try to make a go of this and build some more of these. And so he got the only one ever built in 1986. So he had 86001. Wow. The only one I built in 86. In fact, that was before I discovered powder coating. So his chassis is spray canned Krylon.
Okay, right.
And I silk screened it myself.
Right.
And so that was that amp. And then after then in 87 is when I then took a batch of 10 more chassis and got them powder coated, which is like, ooh, this is cool, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And
I didn't have to do it.
And I didn't have to do it. And so then I built number 2, which I actually built for myself, but that's the one I ended up selling to Howard because he was good. Again, I bring it in, he plugs it in, he loves it. And I'm like, I'll go build you another one. No, I want this one. I'm like, that's my amp. You know, it was red. It had red Tolex on it. Actually, it was white Tolex that I'd sprayed red. So, but of course, Howard Lease loved red at that time. So he's like, no, I want this one. So
they all do that, don't they?
They do. And so we're at Rumbo. He's like, oh, I don't have my checkbook with me. I'll be right back. He jumps in his Porsche, takes off for Malibu. Meanwhile, I'm just like hanging out in the loud. And I've never been in a professional recording studio up to this point because I'm a yokel from Seattle. I've never seen it.
A lot of knobs.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, so I got to hang out there and I got to meet Ann and Nancy when they came in. So it was really a kind of a cool thing. And so that was the first sale I made. So he had serial number 87002. Right. And then from there, like I say, the next one was Steve. And then I think because of...
Like Warren DeMartini come in around
He
there?
came pretty early on. But before that, because of Steve buying an amp, Andy Brower decided he had to have one for his rental things. And he just saw a way to bring it all under one roof and monetize. Steve kind of paved the way, you know, and then from there it just...
When I hooked up with him, my career took another leap.
Yeah.
Another bump up, you know.
Yeah.
As did when... He was instrumental in hooking me up with Van Halen. Took off from there, you know, and then he got one too with you.
Yes, he did. In fact, on Valentine's Day is when Eddie came down to the shop to pick up his first amp.
Yeah.
It's like, I go, I got to be somewhere. Oh, I'm coming today. You know, it's like, you know, that's something these, you know, they just don't. It's like,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
so that was
their world, and we're just living in it.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, you're also responsible for this too.
How so?
Well, I'll tell you how. So you probably aren't aware of this, but after Steve got his amp, and probably about the time we were starting on this, you must have talked to Vivian Campbell, and and you were going to build a system for him.
I did,
and so he called me up. He left a message on my machine. Things hadn't really started cooking for me yet, so I was doing anything to pay the rent on my little shop that I had gotten there on Melrose. So I got a gig roadieing for this all-girl band, Vixen. I think you might remember them. Yeah, Vixen. So I was helping Jan out, and I had a van at the time, so I was able to haul equipment around for them. So super late, you know, I get home, it's 4 a.m. by the time I drop them off and all their gear in Reseda, come back to, or Tarzana, wherever it was, come back to my shop in Hollywood. And normally I would go straight to bed because I was exhausted, but my phone machine had messages, and for some reason I was compelled to like check my machine at 4 a.m. as if I'm going to call anybody back, right? But I just had to. There's something bugging me. I had a call from Landau, from Lou Reed, and from Vivian Campbell. 3 calls all in one day that I missed. Lou Reed had heard about Steve's amp through John Sir because John was building Lou's guitars at the time, so he wanted to know more about that.
Yeah.
Landau, of course, heard Steve's amp and he wanted one. But then Vivian, he's like, hey, he says, I'm having Bob build me a rack rig, but he says, I really love Steve's amp. He says, I want that sound, but he says, I want to make that, I want it to be rack mountable, and I want to have a preamp out on it so that I can run it through the rack rig if we want to do it that way too. And so you had told him about me apparently because he called me up and says, can you do, right? And so he says, can you do this for me? And I said, I can. Now, I didn't even have a clue how I was going to fit that into a 19-inch rack, but I was like, hey, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, you know, for sure. That's what you do.
And that's what I do. And so I sat down and I sketched out this chassis like in no time. And then the ones I built for Vivian were just overdrive only, but then I also had a preamp out knob, I think, on it. And then I figured out a way to do the standby switch so that he could still run the preamp with power on it, but turn off the power tubes so, he could run it with no load on the output.
Yeah.
And so it was because of,
that's funny.
you building in that rack and you telling him that I could probably do this.
He
got two. He got two. So he
Smart.
got those two rack. And so since I had already gone to the trouble of designing a chassis, I figured, well, might as well make a full featured production version of it as well.
Yeah.
And so that's what,
So you shoehorned a few more knobs.
yeah, that's what made that, which is now this. And then this amp here on the bottom of this rack is also pretty much your fault as well. When you built the system for Mark Youngersmith, when you started playing for Billy Idol, well, he was running high watts for his left and right, and then he wanted to run an SLO up the middle.
Okay.
But he wanted it to be rack mountable, so I built him, I used my chassis, and then I built him these, basically it's a clone of a DR102 high watt preamp with the Soldano power section.
Okay.
So he could put those in his rack so that he could, modulize the whole thing and tie it into your system.
Sure, yeah.
And so that's one of
funny.
Mark's old amps. So I traded him that later days. He wanted a combo, so he traded me. So that also was in a Bradshaw.
I love how the
custom audio electronics.
Yeah. See, that's the other beauty thing that I loved about your stuff, Mike, was simplicity.
I'm all about simple.
Me too, man.
Yeah, right?
I mean, who else makes a 20-channel mixer with two knobs?
Right. Yeah, there you go.
And audio routers that have no controls at all.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I appreciated your aesthetic.
Oh, thank you.
For sure. In that everything was really simple. And the build quality especially was, it's what's behind the panel, man, is everything. And
well, your stuff was the same way. I looked
everything
at that.
was meticulously put together, and it was a piece of art.
Yeah. Well, likewise for what you built, I looked inside of those.
Well, there's certain design things that, I still look at my original foot controllers and I honestly go, wow, that thing is cool and it's simple. Yeah. And it's like, that's the way I like it.
Simple. Simple is good.
Yeah, man. And I remember too, something that was real smart that you once said that made perfect sense to me. It was kind of like a aha moment, is that you were never fond of effects loops in amps because, and I like the way you put it, it's like you're exposing the guts of the amplifier to the outside world. Right. And that made, I was like, God, he's absolutely right, because you open up a can of, if you want your amp, now this doesn't necessarily hold true with the preamp, that's a little different because it's separate, but I mean, especially with the amps here, which I understand you've redesigned that because everybody
do have a good loop now. Yeah,
everybody seems to have an effects loop.
Yes,
and
so I couldn't push against the current much longer. So
exposing the guts of your amp to the outside world, and if you want to contain the sound of your amp,
what's the quickest way to screw up the sound of something is to put it in the hands of somebody else.
So true.
And that was the deal back in the day. Is like. When I first started putting loops in the original SLOs, I had a real big decision to make. Do I make it line level?
Yes.
Or do I make it effects pedal level? And where do I put it in circuit? Well, my compromise that I thought at the time made total sense because I was mainly dealing with professionals that were using pro rack gear such as what you were using. You
gave them a damn line out off the output transformer
exactly for slaving. So for the loop, I went line level and I put it before the EQ because that way I figured at least that way if the effects screwed up the tone some, you could correct it with it. You could shape it a little bit. Yeah. And as time went on, that became a problem because everybody started wanting to use $99 effects pedals in the loop and the output level of the SLO is just blowing those things wide open.
Because you want to crank the gain. The gain wasn't adjusted, or the gain of the amp affected the effects loop send.
Send it did. That's right. Yeah. This guy, the new loop we're using, solves all those problems in that we still have channel master volumes like the original SLO had, but really what these are is these are like pre-loop level controls. Mm-hmm. And then we put a master, which is really, if you want to look at it, is a post-master level control.
It's like a power amp input level control.
Exactly.
Right?
So this way you can use by using all 3 knobs, you can get whatever level you want to hit your effect however you want. So if you want to put like, a 1970s, Mutron effect in there. Yeah. You can dial these down so you don't overload the input, and then you can crank this up to bring that weak signal coming out of the.
And do you have a cathode follower on the send?
Yes.
So so it was low impedance.
Low impedance anyway, so you can just drive all day long.
Yeah.
So that's what we did here, and we've done it also on the other amps. The regular. SLO has it. It's actually called loop return level on that.
Yeah.
Here we call it the master same diff.
Yeah.
And then of course here this is really just more of a feed through. So it's kind of a whole different deal, but you can still use these as your drive level.
Yep.
And use this as your output level through these 2 jacks here.
Handy. So these guys affect what comes out here?
What comes out here, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then this is what you're getting here, which is basically this comes back in. Oh, and then the other thing is we gave 2 loop level settings here. We've got a push button switch.
Yeah, that's handy.
You can change your level so that you can rough it in.
Your nominal level.
You can rough it in here. You can fine tune it here.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
And you're all
Very
set.
Cool.
You're good to go. And same with these. These have a level. The XLRs also have a level control. So
So if it's a preamp input or a mic level input.
Exactly. Yes.
You can attenuate it. So
exactly. Yeah. Especially like if you're doing a thing where you're going direct into house, kind of thing.
You're not necessarily sure whether the engineer guy is going to go into mic level or line level.
How to
push the
button on the board. Exactly. So you can push it for him over here.
Right.
You just don't touch anything on the board.
Yeah, don't worry, man. We'll take care of you.
Take care of you. That's right.
So tell me more about this.
Okay.
So you kept the basic form factor.
Yes.
And added the stuff around it.
Yes.
How involved were you in the development of all of this stuff?
I did all the audio stuff. And then I let the fine people at Synergy do the IR stuff because I have no idea how to design that stuff. That's so out of my wheelhouse.
And I took a peek inside, and it's beautifully manufactured, man.
It's nice, isn't it?
Really nice inside.
It's sweet. Purple circuit boards and all.
Yeah, that was a nice touch.
Nice touch, right?
And so it looks great. And it's very modular too. So, you can pull out sections if you need to, if there's any issues.
Services should be very good on these.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is I used chips that are like not esoteric so that they'll be available 15 years from now.
That's
if you
another
ever need
big
them.
problem, and I'm running into it now.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff's becoming obsolete.
Yeah,
I know it.
It's bad.
Yeah, it's like a lot of the stuff, a lot of these parts that I thought would be available forever and ever and ever
are not
anymore.
That's
and
tough.
that's a kind of a hard thing to wrap. But see, that's the problem. We've been in business so long that's why it's happening.
Well, when you have a product that keeps going for so long and just won't die.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to be able to get parts for it. It's not always an easy.
So that was the biggest thing about this was putting the IR technology in it. And the thing that's cool about this now is it was always, I felt, a pretty good preamp. It
Absolutely.
It did its thing really well. But now you can use it as a recording device too, because now it's got the XLR outs.
Yep.
It's got, so on these balance outs, it's also got a power amp emulation going on inside.
Now, is that on the quarter inches as well?
It's just on the balance.
Just on the balance.
Just on the balance.
Okay, that's good.
So these you can still run your basic, normal, wired into the rack, use real power amps, do all that kind of stuff.
But tell me, whereabouts in the signal path does it go to the extra stuff? Is this tube-based out of here?
Yes, so the sand.
Totally tube-based out of here.
So this, up to the sand, is basically like the ones I built in the past. The original guy there.
Yeah.
So it's all tube driver, tube everything up to the effects send.
Right.
So if you wanted to capture all of the essence of the original X88. You just plug a thing in the send and
go into a power amp into speakers,
you're
and
there.
boom, you're on.
You're on.
An effects return or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you want to grab all the other stuff this thing does, then you go ahead and come out over here, or even over here, because here you still get the split internally so that you can have your
effects and stuff in there if you need to.
And these are controlled by this master
here. I noticed that.
Whereas
and
this...
the headphones are separate. That was cool. I noticed that.
And this is the other thing for the guy that's sitting at home doing home recording. Awesomeness having this.
That's the way I listen to it first. I haven't plugged it into actual speakers or anything because I'm working out of my apartment.
Right. Sure.
So I listen to it on headphones.
That's what I was doing at home, too.
Yeah, and I listen to it on full range, monitor-y type.
Right, like studio stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's how I listen
and that's where this is great. So this you can control here. If you just want to use this, then your outputs, these are your output levels. So the cool thing is...
But if you want this
guy
comes out of here.
Comes out of here. So
gotcha.
So that's when you can get into your IRs and get those guys going.
Yeah.
And
there's different cabinet and power amp combinations. And they emulated your cabinets?
My cabinets and other cabinets too.
Yeah.
So there's, I think this comes loaded with 6 different ones, but when you get the software, there's additional ones on the software that you download for this as well.
Right.
And you can load this thing into a laptop, and then you can pick the cabinets there. And so you can
cool.
change your library of IRs in the software. So like in there, they've got like British 412, and so it's like
open back, closed back cabs, and that kind of stuff.
Single open backs and stuff like that. So you can load whatever you want in there. It comes with a pretty nice little selection, and so you've got that. And then like you pointed out over here, what's so fun is we've just added more voicing options for the various channels. Like, I'll be the first to admit the original clean channel in this was a little bit limited in that I was trying to cover too much ground with just one deal.
Yeah.
And so this, when it's kind of like in the normal deal, it's kind of, let's switch up to that one. It's sort of a Fender-y kind of vibe.
Right, yeah.
And then,
as the original was.
Yeah, like that. Yeah. But now it's got this altered thing too, which gives you a little more gain in that. So if you want to kind of have that, like
crunch it
up a little bit.
That's cool.
And then a 3-position bright switch, which is pretty awesome.
That's different.
And then the same thing with down here is we've got the original bright switches, but then we've got this fat thing, which basically gives you a little bit, kind of up in the front end. It puts some bigger coupling caps in there just to kind of like just oof the bass a little.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then, of course, being able to switch between, crunch and overdrive in both channels.
And 2 and 3 are identical?
They're identical.
Okay.
They're identical. I tend to lag on the switch too long. It's a really fast kind of action. But what was cool is by making these the same, we were actually able to condense and make the circuitry a little more efficient, kind of like I did in the X99.
Right.
So we were actually able to reduce the tube count without sacrificing anything because we're just using the same pathways that instead of having, as you'll remember, the original inside of this was that long row.
Yeah.
With all the
for sure.
tubes. A lot of that stuff was redundant. It's like I had multiple output drivers, multiple everything. This, we use a lot of common circuitry, which really makes it a lot more sort of, cohesive.
Yeah.
So, but that's what you learn with, the longer you mess with something, the more you realize that maybe your earlier itinerations weren't the best.
Well,
right?
yeah, for sure, man.
Exactly. And then the other thing is this is now MIDI compatible. So
very cool.
All of these things that you do, all these presets for channels, for all your IRs, you can all work with them there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into that.
And again, the software package that comes on the computer, it makes it so simple. You got your 16 MIDI channels.
I did plug that in, and I had that going while I was messing with it, and it's on the screen.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, right? You can do everything.
The switches on the box, and you see them change.
Exactly. It's pretty cool, and that's the same technology we used in the Astro 20, which we launched last year.
Right.
And it does the same thing. It has that really nice software interface, which is just so easy to use because, like I say, you have the amp on the screen, and when the lights and knobs and everything change on the screen, they do on the amp as well.
So cool.
It's pretty, and again, that's beyond my scope to figure out, but that's what Synergy's really good at.
Yeah.
So they did that
cool.
part.
Well, yeah,
it's awesome.
It's a modernization.
It's a modernization
of a classic. When did you stop making the originals? How many years ago was that?
God, it's been a long time. So
over 10 years?
Yeah, wow. It's probably been over 10 years.
And you concentrated on amps and heads and stuff,
Yeah,
right?
well, it was kind of a weird trajectory. It was kind of like
this business, man. It's
yeah,
a roller coaster.
and so the rack thing kind of went up and up and up, and which of course I wouldn't have even been involved in if it hadn't been for you. So I didn't even know what an equipment rack was before I met you, seriously. And so this is all yours right there. Now that I've had some time and I've got the luxury of working with boutique, I'm able to bring back pro gear, which has kind of always been sort of in my DNA, as yours for sure as well. So that's kind of what brought it back, was just the desire to honor what it came from. We're not going to sell 1 million of these. I mean, this is not going to be a high volume piece.
It never was meant for
It's never meant to be,
right?
though. That's the thing. It was never meant to be. So we're doing it just because we wanted to.
Yeah, man.
I wanted to make stuff with purple faceplates again.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's good to be back.
So I had the license to do so and the facility to do so, and so we were able to do it.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Well, this has been so fun, and it's long overdue for
Indeed, man. I haven't seen you in so long.
I haven't seen you in so long.
I think probably at a NAMM show or something.
Yeah, seriously, that's the last time I saw you. Yeah, it's probably the last time I saw you was at a NAMM show. And so too much time's gone by, but I'm so glad you came out. So good to see you.
Absolutely.
Would you like a tour of the shop?
I would love to see your shop.
Awesome.
I love the rod work going on here.
Well,
man.
I'd love to show it.
Cool. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right.